Mixing with Mike mixing tip, how to raise a vocal up in a mix. Now, in one of the recent ones that I've done here, I talked about bringing a vocal forward in a mix. And part of the comments that came from that was someone who requested that or asked a question about a particular mix. And so I can't remember the artist, but I was listening to the mix, and they were asking how they got the sound for this particular thing. And what I was really noticing is how they raise a vocal up in the mix. And this was always a big part of working a mix. It's like where you place the vocal. The vocal can be tucked in the mix, sort of in the middle. It can rise above the mix. It can be forward and above the mix. It can be forward and just right in front of you in the center. And you have the ability to kind of move it around into these different locations and stuff. So I wanted to kind of go over this a little bit and just start with a vocal sound here.
It shall pass.
So one of the things about getting a vocal to sit right is, first of all, about getting some evenness in it. So in some of the other videos I've shot, you notice I do a low-level compression thing here. And what this is doing is, or not a low-level, a mid-band compression. So we're basically getting it to compress and getting some movement with about 2 or 3 dB of gain reduction. And the net effect of this is that it's adding solidity, evening out the performance.
In your glass, a
So normally we would have makeup gain here.
Honey hands, eat or be fed. The moon is brand new.
And what this does is it helps to bring out a bit of the presence in the voice, makes it more solid sounding overall. Another way that we can help this along is the way that we actually process the EQ. So here on the VEQ3 that you see here, I'm just adding some 12 kilohertz, and basically that's the only thing that I'm doing here. And this just really will raise the vocal up naturally.
In your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hand.
And that air is really amazing, because when you have that really dense presence and breathiness in the air, it will naturally raise the vocal up. So you have to understand in terms, there's 2 aspects of raising a sound up in the speakers, and you have to think above the speakers as high frequencies and below the speakers as low frequencies, and mid-range frequencies are right in between. So when you want to move something up or down in the speakers, it's about where you put the focus of the density. So it's very difficult to set a vocal low in the speakers because it's not largely predominantly low frequency instrument, right? It's the voice is going to mid-range and higher. Even if it goes into the low mid-range, it's not really going to sit there because all the articulation is up above. Whereas a bass can more easily sit and below the speakers, and a kick drum can, because that low frequency energy will sort of emanate or vibrate through the floor. So one of the ways that we can actually help to bring this up is actually to filter more on the low end. So the way that they do this in a lot of the EDM tracks is that they'll take and they'll filter up much higher.
It shall pass.
So
the wine
take
in
out
your
the body
glass,
right out of the voice.
a scratch in your throat, honey hands, eat or be fed. The moon.
And here, although I'm limited with the filter here, I may even want to go in here slightly above this and start to pull back a little bit as well from like the 330 side of thing.
It shall pass. The wine.
And looks like I did a little bit here as well. This is just on a shelf.
Scratch in your throat, honey hands.
So the combination of this is,
Or be fed.
if you listen to this in speakers, will sit sort of lower in the middle of them.
Dirt into bread, lucky few.
Now, here's a classic example of where I would want to use an 1176 to really pump and breathe the vocal. But I'm going to put it after all of the EQ because I really want the characteristic of this to kind of come out. So what I want to do, this is going to kind of mush it together. So this is going to be a pretty heavy pumping and breathing kind of compression, fast release, but a slowish attack or medium attack it's going to be compressing pretty heavily. So this is going to help to pull all of that stuff together. So it's really focused and filtered.
It shall pass, the wine
and also even
in
out some of the
your
harshness.
glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hands.
Maybe just a touch heavy-handed here.
Eat or be fed, the moon is brand new.
So this is what it sounds like without all the stuff.
Dirt into bread, lucky few.
And so now what I have is a vocal track that is very focused and dense, more in the higher frequency range.
Soon it shall pass.
And raises higher in the speaker. So this is just dry. Now, relatively, the rest of the music track has to be a bit warmer. If it's too bright, it will pull the vocal down into the track. So a real key factor here is getting it to sit above is that the density in the high frequency doesn't exist as much in any of the other instruments in the mix.
It shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch in
So this
your
is-
throat, honey hands.
So this is sort of sitting down lower in the mix.
Or be fair, the moon is brand new. Dirt into bread, lucky few.
And now I may be exaggerating that a little bit, but one other thing that I can add on to this is a short delay, which you've probably also seen here. So this will create a bit of a slap effect. And now when I start to put this,
It shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch in your
And
throat, honey hands.
if I filter on this end, on the low side of it here, and I have to go to both sides,
The moon is brand new. Dirt into bread, lucky few.
so they're more high frequency in terms of that delay. I'm actually going to just open this up a little bit here. I should actually just open up both sides of the plugin here and squeeze this open a little.
Soon it shall pass, the wine.
I'm going to have that delay not be full frequency, but actually also sit up high in terms of the frequency. Now this is going to raise it up even more.
It shall pass, the wine in your glass.
Notice how it raises up when I unmute.
Scratch in your throat, honey hands. Eat or be fed, the moon is brand new.
Okay, so you hear that end of things. And now if I'm also going to a reverb, so I have a plate reverb here, what I also want to do is I also want to have this be more predominantly,
It shall pass, the wine in your glass.
be a little bit predominantly more high frequency,
Scratch in your throat, honey hands.
which it'll naturally do because the original
Eat or
signal
be fed, the moon is brand new. Dirt into
it'll naturally have a little bit of this because of the fact that the original signal is already filtered. And I'm really exaggerating it here, but just to give you an idea,
It shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hands. Eat or be fed, the moon is
and I'm going to
brand
feed that
new.
slap delay into that reverb as well.
Dirt into bread, lucky few.
And then it kind of goes on and on and on.
It shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hands.
So this is original with no processing.
Don't be fair.
And notice how it rises with each step I bring in.
Dirt into bread, lucky few.
Of course, I got right up to that section. But you can really hear how each element there raises the vocal up. It's all air, all density in the high frequencies. And then I may have over-filtered it. I'm exaggerating the effect of it a little bit, but you can hear with each successive step as I add a little bit more of the density in the high end, how it just rises above the track. But you also notice that it's not making the rest of the track sound dull. So I have to be a little bit careful about some of the harshness in the voice. So there are ways to deal with that in terms of doing something on the order of a de-essing, but a little bit lower in frequency. So it's getting more in the 2 to 3K range where some of that harshness kind of exists. But that basic idea applies here, and you could see how the density and the high frequencies will really raise it up in the speakers. And that's kind of it's one way to do it. You can also preserve some of the body and have that density in there and still have it raise up in the speakers. And that's a very classic thing to do, especially like in an R&B mix. To still have some of that body, so you don't necessarily have to lose that raising up by cutting away low end. So you don't have to filter it. It's a little bit more of an EDM kind of effect, like filtered on the low end. And I went a little bit harsh with it, a little bit too aggressive with it. But that's the basic idea, just to exaggerate so you could really feel how a vocal can be lifted in the track. So there's our latest mixing tip, how to raise a vocal up in a mix, literally.